All right, so we've got our InDesign document set up, and now we're going to kind of look at creating the the layout using some essential tools within InDesign that I'm going to demonstrate. But I want to kind of flash back to the thumbnail sketches that we did right here, and we had decided that we were going to pick this design here. And then we went from the thumbnail sketch to the rough sketch. And remember, the rough sketch is a more um, refined representation of what we want to try to produce. So as we approach the computer production phase of this process, we want to have our rough sketch out there near us so that we simply just recreate our rough sketch using the tools within InDesign. So, what I'm getting at is don't create your rough sketch and go through all the creative process and then throw this stuff away and then jump on the computer because at this point, when you get to computer production, the rough and the design has already been kind of determined. So all you have to do in the computer production phase is to learn how to use some tools within InDesign to recreate that. So as far as InDesign is concerned, we're going to go through some of the basic tools that you might use. And I just want to kind of preface this entire demonstration with understanding that I'm just kind of showing you the fundamentals of some of the tools within InDesign. InDesign is highly capable of producing full magazine spreads, large books, newspapers, anything that that has tons of text and images, and it can be highly complex. So I'm just kind of brushing the surface. A lot of you guys are enrolled in computer graphics one or two, and you're going to be approaching InDesign in a little bit different fashion in terms of how to learn the software. So just keep that in mind that I'm showing you just enough to kind of get through our project within graphic arts classes or within this graphic arts class, and kind of as we progress through the remaining classes, you'll see that we just kind of go further and further in depth as we go farther into the program. But anyway, we set up our document. Remember, it was 3.5 by 2. I've got my bleed area set. I've got my margin set. And the margins are not going to print. And again, that's just for us to kind of give us some visual guides of where we might need to create some text. So some of the basic tools, if we'll just kind of quickly go through, we have our selection tool. That is to select objects and move them around and possibly resize them. And then direct selection, we'll get into that a little bit later. We're going to kind of skip over these tools here. And the type tool is just what it says. If I wanted to create some type, and it's a little bit different where if you just come out here and click, you're like, well, it didn't do anything. Well, you kind of have to define the area in which the type is going to exist. So you have to create what we call a type box. So if I just click and drag, and then I start typing my name, or whatever it is that I'm going to type, it's within this placeholder. So if I get my selection tool back at the top, that allows me to move this. So unlike a word processor, I can drag and drop type anywhere I want. It doesn't automatically go in the upper left-hand corner. So the type tool is highly capable in terms of what you can do, just like in any other word processor. If I were to select the type, I can come to my font menu and change the font. And one thing that just happened is some of my type went away. And that's what that little red plus sign means over here. It means that there is some type that is you created, but your type box isn't big enough. So this bounding box is too small. So if I just extend that, you can see that my type comes back. So if you see that little red plus sign like that, that means, hey, you've got some type that you typed somewhere, but it's missing. So make your type box bigger. So with any kind of with text, you got all kinds of formatting options. If you select the type, of course, we can change the font like we went over. You can change the size. You can change what we call the leading or line spacing. And then some fonts have, bold options, and some of them don't. We've got a gazillion fonts in here on this within our software, so we can change style of the font pretty easily. Not every font has styles, but this one particularly does. With paragraph formatting, what we're talking about there is, do we want it to be aligned to the left or the middle or to the right, what we call flush right or flush left. So if I select that, you really don't even have to select it. If I get my type tool and I select in here, I can go over here and put it in the center of the type box. If you notice, it didn't center on the document, it's centering within the type box. So, again, it doesn't know what you're trying to create. So you've got, again, text formatting as far as font size, font style, and then you have paragraph formatting, which is dealing with flush right, centered, flush left, and there's some others in there. And it works very similar to any word processor that you might already have experience with. So the type tool, again, and I would recommend having as few type boxes as possible, because when it comes to editing, it just makes editing easier. For instance, I wouldn't want to have my first name here in one text box, and then in another text box I have my last name, and then I'm trying to align all this manually. And then if I go to edit, now I've got to select this text box and change the font, and then select this text box and change the font. And it just we talk about working smarter, not harder. Let the computer do the work. So don't have multiple text boxes when you don't need them. So I'm just going to kind of hit the delete key and get rid of those. Get rid of this type tool. Some of the other basic tools, the line tool just does what it says, and that is allows you to draw lines if you have a line in your design, and you got different stroke widths and different styles in here. It just depends on what it is that you're trying to create. We're going to come back to the pen tool. That's a very powerful tool that can be quite confusing if you're not familiar with it, but I'm going to kind of go through a quick demo of that, and you'll see that. I'm going to kind of jump the pencil tool. Don't worry about that. We're going to jump the frame tool. Don't worry about that. But we've got this next tool, and in any of the tools, if you'll notice, there's a little triangle in the lower right-hand corner of some of these tools, and that means that there's more tools underneath that. So if you'll notice, it looks like if I've got a rectangle, and I said, well, what if I want to draw a circle? Well, if you click and hold, you can scroll down to the ellipse tool, and that allows you to do that. So if I were to draw a circle or an oval, I kind of get that. With the selection tool, I can then resize. Okay, so I don't have to redraw it. I can change the shape. I can do whatever I want with the selection tool. So you do have the ability to do polygons, and again, you just have to experiment with some of this. And I don't know what my polygon is set on. And if you hold Shift, the Shift key down, you will get a perfect hexagon in this case, in terms of equal sides. And if I do a rectangle, if I want a square, if I start drawing, it's like, hey, I want a square, just hold the Shift key down, and it constrains to a perfect square. Same thing holds true for the ellipse. If I get the ellipse tool and I want a perfect circle, I just hold Shift down and it constrains to a perfect circle. So while I have these shapes up here, I want to draw your attention over here on the tool panel. We have these little this little box and this little rectangle. Every shape, whether it is whether it's type or any object you draw or a rectangular geometric shape, whatever it is, you have properties, what we refer to as fill and stroke. And so this big swatch, this big solid area here refers to as the fill, and this piece, this little symbol here indicates the stroke. And so with every object, I have a fill and stroke property. So right now I have a black fill and a black stroke. I'm going to come under Window and pull up my Swatches panel for a second, because I want to show you that that correlates to this. So here's my Swatches panel, and of course I deleted all those colors that I had in the past that I showed you in the previous video. But this little fill and stroke symbol here is the same. It correlates with the fill and stroke on your swatches panel. So you can use either one. It doesn't really matter. So what I kind of wanted to show you, so if I wanted to have a hexagon with a black outline and no fill, I would select the fill property and hit none. If you'll notice, it goes away. How do I know that that's none? Because I can go over top of that. You can see that I can't, it's kind of transparent. And that as opposed to in InDesign, they refer to white as paper. So when you see paper, that just tell yourself that's filled with white. And so when I go over top, you can see that if I move that to the front, I'm going to arrange real quick, and I'll go over that here in a second. We can get into what we call layering, where we have objects in front or behind things. So I've got the square behind the hexagon. If I wanted to bring the square in front, I just use a little keyboard or a little mouse shortcut, but you can come under Object and go to Arrange and choose Bring to Front. Then you can see that changes the stacking order, so to speak. So anytime I want to modify an object, I do have to have it selected, because you might be over here and you're going, hey, I'm changing this to paper and none, and nothing's happening. Well, you didn't select an object, so make sure you have an object selected. And if you want the fill to be white, and then just select the object, select the fill stroke, and then hit paper, and we get it set up like that. So we can we could go through again just drawing simple shapes. But what if I want to draw an irregular shape? And if you look back over here at my rough sketch, I've got this kind of curve. So how did we draw that? Well, I'm going to move my swatches out of the way for a second. We're going to come back to this pen tool. And the pen tool doesn't work like you might think it works. And a lot of people grab the pen tool and they come over and they start to kind of draw, and they're like, wait a minute, something's crazy going on. I'm moving my mouse, but it is not drawing like I want at all. As a kid, you probably did dot-to-dot puzzles where there were dots laid out on the page, and you connected the dots. You drew a dot from number 1 to number 2 to number 3 and so forth, and eventually it created a shape. Well, the pen tool kind of works like that, but in essence, you're drawing the dots and you're not drawing the lines. So if I wanted to draw a square, for instance, I would just click my mouse, click again, click again, click again, and then if you'll get to the end and close what we call that path, you see that little circle pop up. That kind of closes that path, and of course it's not perfect at all, and I kind of drew it like that on purpose. I wouldn't use the pen tool to draw a square anyway. I would use the rectangle tool over here. So you kind of got to, again, work smarter, not harder. Think about what you're trying to draw. And of course, I'm leading up to trying to draw what I have over here on the rough sketch. But what I wanted to show you with the pen tool is that once you draw an object with the pen tool, you can come over here and go back to the top and get your direct selection tool, and you can click on what we call an anchor point, and I can edit that anchor point now. I can move each point individually. So it's like it's a rubber band. So again, those are the dots that I drew, and it's again, you've got other things that you can do. For instance, underneath, and again, look, we got the little little triangle below here. That means there's more tools underneath there. So if I get the convert direction point tool, I'll go over this a little bit later. You can have what we call corner points, which creates a sharp corner like this, like I've drawn. What if I wanted that to be a curve? Well, I would get the convert direction point tool, click on that, and then slowly pull out, and you can see that now I have kind of a curve shape, and I've got these directional handles out here that allow me to manipulate that curve. And again, all this with the direct selection tool. I can move this and do anything I want. So that pen tool, and you're like, where did it go? It's underneath here still. That pen tool is extremely powerful in that you can draw pretty much anything that you want to draw. So it takes lots of practice, and I'm going to kind of go over this in a little bit more detail here. So let me erase that or delete that. Let's say I want to draw an umbrella, and we're all familiar with a kind of a basic umbrella shape, and I want to kind of demonstrate. I showed you that to create corner points, I just click the mouse and that creates nice sharp corners everywhere. But what if I want to draw something that's rounded without having to go through and convert everything using the convert selection tool? So with the pen tool, it has options built in, you just don't know about it. So when I start drawing, I'm going to draw a big umbrella. So if I click here, that's a big corner point. It's a big corner point. And if I get to the middle at the top of the umbrella, I'm going to click and I'm going to hold my mouse down and I'm going to drag out to the right here. And I get kind of a curve now. And I get over here to the other side of the umbrella and I click just a corner point because I want that to be a sharp edge. This is a click and drag because it's a curve. That's just a click because it's a corner or a hard edge. This is another curve, so I'm going to click and drag, click, and then click and drag, and I get to the end, I get that little circle, that's good. I want to close that path. So now I have an object. So I just created a bat symbol or an umbrella symbol, and it's kind of beginning of the Batman logo here. But anyway, and again, you've got fill and stroke properties, where I talked about that. And this little double-headed arrow basically says quickly switch what I have as fill to stroke and vice versa. If you look over here back at the swatches panel, this one it says none. So the difference between none and paper is none is transparent and paper is filled with white, just so you'll kind of know that. So practice with that pen tool and you'll kind of get the hang of it. But let's get on to our business card. So I've got this kind of curve shape and I'm starting over here in the corner. So I'm going to use my pen tool. I'm going to come out here. I'm going to start way out here because according to my rough, this element is going to bleed. It runs off the page. So I'm going to start way down here at my kind of my bleed area. Now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click and drag because that's a curve. And I'm going to click and drag here and that's a curve. And I'm going to come up here to the top and I'm going to click. And I'm going to get to the bottom and I'm going to click. I'm going to get over here and I'm going to click. Now I don't want mine filled with white. I'm going to tell it to flip real quick. I also don't want a stroke, so I'm going to click the stroke and click none. And that gets rid of my stroke. And you're like, well, it kind of doesn't look like my rough sketch. Well, that's the beauty of the pen tool. You can come back and edit these points very easily. So I'm going to select that and move that handle up. And now it's kind of starting to take shape to look more like my rough. Again, you're trying to, with the software, you're just trying to create what you already went through on your creative process, and you came up with this design. So again, this is going to take some practice. I've been doing this a while, so I know what I'm doing, and I've got lots of experience under my belt. But you need to kind of practice that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm kind of done with that shape. I'm going to save. Again, if you don't mind redoing things, then don't worry about saving, but I highly recommend that you save as you create something that you're happy with and you get to a certain stage. Come over here and click save or do file or command S on your keyboard to do that. So now I'm going to create the type. So I'm going to kind of click and drag with the type tool and I'm going to type my name because that's what's going to go on there. I'm going to select all that. You can click and drag through. Now I'm going to pick a font that I want to use, and I'm going to choose Impact. I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. And this little blue bounding box is not going to print. I'm going to show you how to preview the layout here in a second. And I said let's use as few text boxes that we can, but if you've got type that is very different, it's okay to have multiple text boxes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another text box, and this is going to have my email. And you're like, wow, it's huge. Let me back up. And I'll go back. Just keep typing. Don't worry about it. We'll resize this in a second. I can't see what I'm typing, so I'm going to make my bounding box a little bit bigger. So here's my business email and my address, or excuse me, my phone number. So it's too big, and most body type or small type, I would that has just information. I would probably use a sans serif font. something that's easy to read, and because again, that's essentially what you're creating this business card to, is to communicate some information to somebody and give them your contact information. So I've kind of got my layout, very similar to what I have over here on my rough sketch. And I added a couple of little elements in here, just some kind of tricks I'm going to show you, but I'm going to save that for right now. One of the things that InDesign has capability of is using fonts as there's what we call picture fonts. And we do have a collection of those, and you may or may not have that on your computer, but let me just show you to kind of jazz up my business card a little bit with some graphics, and I don't really need to know how to draw them. I'm going to create a text box. I'm going to come under the type menu and choose glyphs. And glyphs basically just shows you a collection of that particular font. I happen to know that I have some fonts in here called Wingdings or Webdings or something. They give you these little icons. So I'm going to choose this one over here that looks like it's my email. And I just double click and it inserts right there for me. And then what that's going to allow me to do is, again, it's a font, so I can resize it like a font. I can double click, change the size of that a little bit. So now I've got a little icon, and I'm going to position that next to my email. So now I've got a little graphic there. And I'm using my keyboard arrow keys to kind of nudge this stuff over instead of trying to use the mouse. Sometimes it's tough. So I'm going to get another little text box because I need a symbol for my phone. So I'm going to go back to Wingdings. And I think I have a little phone icon here. That's a old style phone, but it's good enough. People understand what that means. I'm going to close my glyphs panel. And again, that's under type glyphs if you're trying to get there. And so you got to create a box first. And I'm going to position this in here. And it's a little bit big. So how do I make it smaller? Select it because it's a font essentially, and I'm going to change the font size up top. Then I'm going to use my keyboard and nudge this over to get it in line. So sometimes it's confusing if we zoom in. That's one of the tools I didn't show you. If we zoom in a little bit, I've got these blue lines, and sometimes it can get confusing. So over here on your tool panel, if you'll click over here, you've got, if I can find it, here it is at the bottom. Is it at the bottom here? Yeah, there's a little option that says preview. And preview means let's get rid of, not throw away, but get rid of, hide all of the elements that aren't going to print, like my margins. Let me see what it's going to look like. And so this is kind of where we are now. And, I think I'm going to nudge him up over there. You don't have to have your margins on there, turned on, but to get back to the normal layout view, just come back under here and just choose normal, and you can see all your lines. So at this point, I'm ready to save again, and then we would print a proof. So I would go to File and Print. That's the next phase of production, is to print a proof. And to set this up, I'm going to come under here and choose, I like to put this in the center, and I'm going to choose crop marks, and I'll show you what those are here again. I'm going to have document bleed settings selected, and I'm going to hit print, and it's going to come out of my printer hopefully. And then I'm going to, once I proof this image to make sure that I've got all the correct information on there, I'm going to export what we call a PDF, because that's what I need for the plate making stage, or to the pre-press, to the file to send to the pre-press workflow. So I'm going to come under Adobe PDF presets and choose a press quality proof. I'm going to let it name it what it wants. You can name it whatever you want. Hit save. This dialog box looks very similar to the print dialog box, and I want to do something very similar, and that is come under marks and bleeds, choose crop marks, and then use document bleed settings and export. And all that does is it creates a file for me, and if you can see it over here on my desktop, this is the file that it created. So you can see that I have, these are called crop marks, and the document bleed settings allows the printer to print beyond the document size. So you can see that the element runs past the crop marks, and that's what we want. So here is the layout that we did within InDesign, and at this point, I'm ready to advance to the next phase. So we would make any, look at this, make any changes that we feel necessary, and if we approve, we move to the next phase, and that is what we call sending it to the pre-press workflow system, the XMF, and I'll have a demo video for that in the next section.